I love Kirby, you love Kirby, and the music is always so fun. So today we'll be looking at how Kirby music satisfies that human tendency toward pattern recognition through the lens of phrase bar analysis. For decades, Kirby has been winning us over with colorful and charming games, sucking down enemies, getting new powers, and spitting out stars, with relatively few surprises. Okay, you got me there, I was not expecting that. In spite of a few twists and turns, music in Kirby games has always felt pretty straightforward, and there is a reason for this. Although you might not think that Kirby music has much in common with, say, Final Fantasy VI or Legend of Zelda, there is one core element: structure. In music theory, we talk about form and structure in pretty particular terms. I should mention that this is specifically within the context of analysis of Western European musical practices from the mid-17th to late 19th centuries, but that's a mouthful, so let's condense it. How about Western Analytical Practices, or WAP for short? That's a good acronym, right? I don't think that means anything else. Yeah, we're good. So if we think about Kirby music through the lens of WAP, we start to see a lot of patterns emerging. This is one reason the Kirby soundtracks feel easy to listen to. Humans are pre-wired for pattern recognition, and when the brain makes a prediction about something based on patterns and is right, it feels good. It's a reward system based on millennia of evolution. If you and your friends are out foraging in the woods and you see all the telltale signs of fruit, you'll be rewarded with long life and many descendants if you follow those signs to the fruit. The stakes aren't as high now, but the same sense of satisfaction occurs when music does what you think it will. For the illustration of phrase structure in Kirby music, I'm going to look at Kirby and the Crystal Shards for the Nintendo 64. In addition to being the first Kirby game rendered with 3D environments, it also featured this sick double-bladed lightsaber, which after Phantom Menace came out was all my little gaming bard heart could have ever wanted. So let's start with World 1, Stage 1.
A very good place to start.
When we start to analyze form and structure, it's good to follow the analogy of the forest and the trees. If you focus too much on the forest, you'll miss the individual elements that make it what it is. But if you focus too much on the trees, you'll lose sight of the bigger picture. Phrase analysis requires focus on both. Let's listen to a section of this forest first. You might say that it does the same thing twice, and you'd be mostly correct, but let's put that in WAP terminology. The first 8 measures are nearly identical to the second 8 measures, except that measure 8 ends on re, and measure 16 ends on do. Now let's look closer at the trees. Within the first 8 measures, we essentially have 4 elements, each lasting 2 measures. The first is this little tune that ends on low so. The second is the same tune, but ending on high so. Then we get 2 measures of a melodic sequence, moving from la down to mi. Then the last 2 measures hang out on re, not quite finishing the scale down to do. We would call these 8 measures together one phrase. A phrase in music is similar to a phrase in language. We want it to start somewhere, do something, and end somewhere. If I tried to stop in measure 6, it would be like saying, I am tired, so I go. It might work grammatically, but we feel like we're missing key information. Go to bed, to the coffee shop. Measure 7 to 8 gives us that final piece of the phrase that we need to make sense. In this case, the phrase ends on re in the melody and so in the bass. This outlines a 5 chord, which implies a half cadence. It feels like a place to pause, but it's not the end. This type of phrase has a special name because of its construction, a sentence. In music, a sentence is when a phrase can be broken up as 2 plus 2 plus 4, and the 4 is often 1 plus 1 plus 2. That may seem confusing, but look. We talked about how the first 2 measures and the second 2 measures have the same melodic material, but end on different octaves of so there is our 2 plus 2. The next 4 can be broken up like this. Measure 6 repeats the material of measure 5 a third lower, so that gives us 1 plus 1, and the last 2 measures set up our half cadence. The final four measures of a sentence often have this type of fragmentation as a way to increase momentum to the cadence. Measures 9 to 14 are identical to measures 1 through 6, but measure 15 changes so that the bass and melody are set up to end on do. This is called an authentic cadence, and it feels much more final. So is there a name for this pair of phrases? You bet! It would be called a period, which is indicated by the fact that the first phrase ends on a half cadence and the second ends on an authentic cadence. These would also be called antecedent consequent phrases, reflecting the two types of cadences. In language terms, antecedents pose a question, while consequents give the answer. You could go further, describing this as a parallel period, since the musical material is so similar. So this is all well and good if you want to talk someone's ear off about it, but what if you want to show it? Typically, we assign small letters to denote phrases, and show the breakdown of them, or subphrases, with curved lines and measure numbers, so this section would look like this. The prime label indicates phrases that are mostly the same, but with a small change. We label whole sections with capital letters, so this would all be called big A. We then get a contrasting 8 bars with new material. This single phrase stays in our home key of F for the first half, then uses modal mixture to veer off the path into A flat briefly before ending with a half cadence back in F. It's brief and basically just serves as a link between the first A section and the repeat of the A section. It's different enough to merit its own letter though, so we'll diagram this as B, and it's half the length of A. As I mentioned, the A section repeats in full, so there's no need to diagram it again, it's the same. Now we get to something interesting. There is a direct modulation to B major. Side note, I love that Jun Ishikawa just dives straight into a new key that's a tritone away. These are not closely related keys, they're like third cousins who haven't seen each other since they were babies. This transition is the tonal equivalent of this, like, who saw it coming? So we're in B major suddenly, with no transition or apology, and we can see that we're developing a rhythmic motif from the second half of our original sentence. These four measures circle around this B major tetrachord with upper and lower neighbors. Suddenly again, he takes us up a half step to C major, and repeats the four measures a minor second higher. Then we get two fragments as the sequence continues to climb, with just the first half of the phrase going through D major and E major. The rising sequence reaches a peak here, then descends for two measures with just the first part of the rhythmic motive over a stepwise bass line. This bass line settles on D for two measures, then on B flat for two measures. This B flat pivots us back towards F major, as the melody takes the smallest rhythmic fragment and climbs over G and C major, 2 and 5 in F major, ending on another half cadence. At this point, the track loops, and we're back at A again. So how to diagram this section? Even though it borrows a rhythmic motive from A, the musical material is clearly different enough to warrant a new letter, so let's call this whole section C. These first four measures can be grouped by virtue of sitting in B major, and the next four can be grouped as C major. Because the harmonic rhythm speeds up in the next line, our diagram should reflect that, so the next line will be 2 plus 2, 2 bars of D and 2 bars of E. The next phrase is a little odd. These two bars go together as a new sequence, but they're both fragmented, so we could also label them as 1 plus 1, similar enough to be grouped, but the second is just a transposition of the first. We could put the next four together as a grouping since they both prolong a bass note, but perhaps denote the 2 plus 2 to show where the harmony changes. The last two measures clearly belong on their own, as they use a new rhythm to propel us back to our home key. Notice in this section that we don't have anything like the nice, neat parallel period of the A section. The C section is disjunct, with no real cadences, and passing through a number of tonal centers. That's okay. Sometimes phrases are obvious, with a rise and a fall and a conclusion, and sometimes you can just barely tell where something changes enough to start a new idea. To use a Mass Effect comparison, consider the difference in how Liara speaks versus how Mordant speaks.
And then, like all the other forgotten civilizations throughout galactic history, the Protheans disappeared.
No art, no culture, closer to husks than slaves, tools for reapers. Protheans dead.
We know what they're both saying, but the way they say it is pretty different. So this is what a form diagram of this pop star track would look like. Notice how it's important not just to get the length of phrases, but also to show various key areas and cadences. The nice thing about a form diagram is that you don't have to do a chord-by-chord analysis. That analysis would be like looking at leaves, while this diagram is intended to show the trees. The larger picture of the forest would look something like this. You can show as many or as few details on these diagrams as you like. Now, does all music look like this? Of course not. Remember that form diagrams are especially useful in Western analytical practices, and not all music fits into that style. A lot of what we hear in video games does, though, which is why it can be so satisfying to listen to. Because these phrase groupings of 4 and 8 are so pervasive, we come to expect and predict them, and that evolutionary itch of pattern prediction gets scratched every time it works out. I hope you learned something about the terms and practices music theorists use to analyze music. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe for more content like this. If you've got more questions about any of this, or can think of other songs that fit this format, let me know in the comments. I'll see you next time.
He'll handle this.
We'll take the long way.